Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. This is a highly requested topic. I'm super excited to record this episode. It is complex, but hopefully you get some really helpful tips from it. If you've been trying to conceive for months or even years and no one has talked to you about your immune system, this episode is for you. And heck, even if you know you have an immune system concern, autoimmunity of some sort, listen in because there's probably some tips in here that you may not have heard before in relation to reproduction. One of the biggest misconceptions in fertility is that autoimmune diseases only matter once they've been diagnosed. But the reality is that autoimmunity often begins years, sometimes even a decade or more before your symptoms actually start appearing. During that time, the immune system can quietly create inflammation that affects everything from hormone production and egg quality to implantation and maintaining a healthy pregnancy. So today we're going to talk about why your immune system matters for fertility, how autoimmunity develops, why it has become so much more common, and most importantly, what you can do to calm immune dysfunction and create a healthier environment for pregnancy. I also want to start with something that I think is incredibly important. Having an autoimmune condition does not mean you cannot have a healthy pregnancy. Okay, I've worked with many couples where autoimmunity was one of the missing pieces. And when we stopped chasing symptoms and actually started improving the environment that the immune system was functioning in, inflammation came down, labs improved, and pregnancies followed. Your genes are not your destiny. They are simply instructions waiting for signals from the environment. Right. And I have a very, very personal story related to autoimmunity, which I'm not going to get into detail in today's episode, but I have recorded my personal story in the past. So we can link that episode also in the show notes. So let's talk a little bit about what autoimmunity means. So autoimmune diseases are now the third most common category of chronic illness behind cardiovascular disease and cancer. Women account for nearly 80% of autoimmune diagnoses and are about 4 times more likely than men to develop an autoimmune disease. There are now more than 100 recognized autoimmune conditions. Some of the more common ones include Hashimoto's thyroiditis, that's the one that I have, Graves' disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, celiac disease, also one that I have, and inflammatory bowel disease. Although these diseases affect different tissues, they all share something in common. They represent a loss of immune tolerance. And instead of recognizing what belongs in your body and what doesn't, the immune system begins reacting against your own healthy tissues. But here's what functional medicine asks and what conventional medicine often doesn't. Why did the immune system lose tolerance in the first place? Because autoimmune diseases don't simply just appear overnight. They develop over years through a combination of genetic susceptibility and environmental exposures that change how our genes are expressed. This is where epigenetics becomes so important. Your DNA may load the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger. Okay, so let's talk about that and really how autoimmunity affects fertility. Many people think of the immune system as something that only fights infections, but reproduction is actually one of the most immune-dependent processes in the entire body. Think about it. A developing embryo contains half of your partner's genetic material. From an immune perspective, it is not completely yourself, right? Your immune system has to perform an incredible balancing act. It needs to remain strong enough to protect both mom and baby from infections while also becoming tolerant enough to welcome and support the embryo, or at least the foreign part of the DNA to make that embryo. This process begins before implantation, right? The uterine lining becomes populated with specialized immune cells, including uterine natural killer cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, regulatory T cells. And despite their intimidating names, these immune cells are not there to attack the embryo, or they should not be there to attack the embryo if functioning appropriately. In a healthy pregnancy, they help prepare the endometrium for implantation. They remodel blood vessels. They support placental development. They regulate inflammation and communicate with the embryo during the earliest stages of pregnancy. Implantation itself is actually a carefully controlled inflammatory event. Okay, so not all inflammation is bad. For a very short period of time, the immune system creates an inflammatory response that allows the embryo to attach. Immediately afterward, the immune system shifts toward a more tolerant, anti-inflammatory state so the pregnancy can continue developing. When immune regulation is disrupted, that transition may not occur efficiently. And instead, the body may remain in an overly inflammatory state or fail to develop the immune tolerance needed to support the pregnancy. Research has associated immune dysregulation and autoimmune disease with longer time to conception, implantation failure, recurrent miscarriage, placental dysfunction, pregnancy complications, including preeclampsia, which is actually related to placental dysfunction as well, and reduced IVF success rates. Now, that does not mean that autoimmunity is always the cause, but if you've experienced or been told that you have unexplained infertility, also known as underinvestigated subfertility, recurrent pregnancy loss, repeated implantation failure, thyroid antibodies, or multiple autoimmune conditions in yourself or your family, your immune system deserves a much closer look. So let's talk about a couple of specific autoimmune conditions. So Hashimoto's is really the fertility autoimmune disease that we see most often, or the autoimmune condition we see most often in our fertility clients. The autoimmune condition I probably see the most in practice as a whole is Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And many women are told that their thyroid numbers are quote unquote normal, while no one has ever measured their thyroid antibodies. Here's the problem. You can have normal thyroid hormone production while antibodies are actively attacking thyroid tissue. Several studies have shown that elevated thyroid antibodies are associated with an increased risk of miscarriage and fertility challenges, even when the thyroid hormone levels remain within normal laboratory ranges. This is why I almost always recommend evaluating thyroid antibodies as part of a comprehensive fertility workup. Not almost always, always. Because we're not just asking whether the thyroid is functioning today. We're asking whether the immune system is creating unnecessary inflammation that could interfere with fertility. Why are autoimmune diseases increasing? Why are they becoming so much more common? Well, our genes haven't changed dramatically in the past few generations, but our environment absolutely has. Many of the factors we now know influence immune regulation include environmental toxins. This includes heavy metals, pesticides, plastics, air pollution, endocrine disrupting chemicals in our products, mycotoxins from mold. All of these can increase oxidative stress and place additional demands on detoxification systems essentially taking resources away from reproduction at so many different levels, including immune system regulation. Chronic infections is another one that increases risk for autoimmune dysregulation. This can be viruses, bacteria, parasites, Lyme disease, periodontal disease, H. pylori, and other persistent infections that keep the immune system activated long after initial infection has actually resolved. I see H. pylori all of the time in practice in my unexplained infertility clients. Gut health, which also involves H. pylori, but nearly 70% of immune system or immune cells are actually associated with the gastrointestinal tract. When the gut barrier becomes damaged or that microbiome loses diversity, bacterial components can actually cross into circulation and stimulate more immune activation. Circadian rhythm disruption is also really important to consider when looking at the immune system and its regulation. Poor sleep, night shift work, excessive artificial light, especially at nighttime, inconsistent sleep schedules all influence immune signaling and inflammatory pathways. Chronic stress is a big one. Your immune system and nervous system are constantly communicating. So persistent stress can actually shift immune balance toward a more inflammatory state while also impairing recovery and repair. Nutrient deficiencies, which really any of these conditions contribute to nutrient deficiencies, but we can see nutrient deficiencies outside of like poor gut health and chronic infections as well. So especially nutrient markers like vitamin D, selenium, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, iron, choline, B vitamins, and antioxidant nutrients. These all play a really important role in immune regulation. And there's typically a lot of low numbers in these categories, low intake among these nutrients in unexplained infertility cases as well. And blood sugar instability is another big one. Repeated glucose spikes and insulin resistance actually promote oxidative stress and chronic inflammation that influences immune function. A sedentary lifestyle is also something to consider because regular movement actually helps regulate inflammation. It improves mitochondrial health, it supports lymphatic drainage, and improves insulin sensitivity, which again influences immune function. Okay, so those are things that can contribute to immune dysregulation, but how do we calm the immune system? Well, the goal is certainly not to suppress your immune system. The goal is to help it become more regulated. So step one is identifying and removing the triggers that are overstimulating it. So we have to ask why the immune system is actually sounding the alarm in the first place. Is there an infection? Maybe there's a food sensitivity. Maybe there's mold exposure or heavy metal toxicity. Maybe there's really poor sleep. Maybe there's a lot of insulin resistance or ongoing oxidative stress for one reason or another. And at the same time, I like tracking inflammatory markers over time, including CRP, ESR, ferritin, of course, when it's interpreted in context of an iron panel, as well as the other inflammatory markers. And when clinically appropriate, additional immune markers too. Next, we want to see what's going on with nutrition. Your immune cells require an incredible amount of energy and nutrients to function properly. So focusing on meals that are built around high quality protein, colorful fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, fiber-rich whole foods, herbs, spices, and adequate minerals is really important. It's not about restriction. It's actually about supplying the building blocks that your immune system needs to regulate itself. Next, we want to think about healing the gut. So addressing any infections that are present. I'm a big fan of doing gut microbiome testing to see what that environment looks like and how to appropriately target it. And we want to make sure that we're increasing microbial diversity to help keep that environment really robust, which naturally helps the lining health and immune system activity and make sure we're repairing any intestinal lining damage that is present, making sure we're feeding that beneficial bacteria with really fiber-rich whole foods. A healthier gut often leads to a healthier immune system response. So that's a really, really important connection to look at. We actually have immune system markers in microbiome testing that we look at for further insight to what's happening with that immune system regulation, among other testing. Next, we want to make sure we are reducing toxic exposure or toxin exposure. You cannot avoid every toxin. It's not about perfection, but we want to lower that overall toxic burden. And we can do that by improving indoor air quality, making sure that we're drinking good filtered drinking water. We can choose less toxic personal care items, especially those that we are putting on our skin every day, that we're breathing in every day. We want to make sure that we're staying well hydrated, not just with plain water, but with electrolytes. Also, we want to make sure we're prioritizing fiber to support elimination of toxins, because a fair amount of them are eliminated in the bowels. We want to make sure that we're sweating through exercise or sauna if appropriate. That also helps eliminate toxins too. Opening up those detox pathways is really important as you decrease your exposure to toxins. Eating antioxidant-rich foods every day is also really helpful for kind of mitigating that oxidative stress and damage that can be occurring from higher toxic load, and even elimination of toxins too. Next, we want to make sure that we are helping our body adapt to stress and regulating stress as it comes. So it's impossible to completely eliminate stress, right? That's not realistic, but we want to make sure we're adapting to it appropriately. And this goes beyond meditation. I mean, meditation can be a great tool, but we want to make sure you're supporting your circadian rhythm, getting outside within the first hour of waking to get that natural skylight. We want to make sure that we're using our food to support our circadian rhythm also. And again, thinking about that light exposure in the evening to support that sleep quality too. Strength training, walking, stabilizing blood sugar, and really prioritizing sleep are really all important for helping our body adapt to stress and regulate that stress that's coming in. We want to create consistent routines that tell your nervous system that it is safe. Remember, your nervous system and immune system are having a conversation every minute of the day. All right. And next, we have to make sure that we're addressing the mitochondria too. And in a lot of these other strategies or steps, you are supporting the mitochondria, but remembering that your mitochondria produce the energy that every immune cell requires, and giving it that energy or the resources it needs to create that energy is really important. So when inflammation and toxic damage or inflammation and toxins damage that mitochondria, immune regulation actually becomes much more difficult. So we want to support those mitochondria with adequate protein, regular movement, magnesium, and antioxidants like CoQ10, L-carnitine, omega-3 fatty acids, really antioxidant-rich foods, and restorative sleep. Okay, so don't just go like blindly purchase all of those supplements. Ideally, these are really well tailored to you, and focusing on food first for all of these nutrients is going to be extra helpful. But a healthy mitochondria help create healthy immune cells, as well as just healthy overall fertility for egg cells and sperm cells as well. Testing that I commonly consider if autoimmunity is on my radar, I'm thinking about ANA with reflex testing, comprehensive thyroid panel, including those thyroid antibodies, rheumatoid markers when appropriate, high sensitivity CRP, ESR. Those are inflammatory markers that give us insight to what's happening in the body, and just inflammatory wise. And in context with immune system markers, we can get even more insight that way. Hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin, ferritin, and a complete iron panel are helpful too. A lipid panel with advanced markers such as fibrinogen, when appropriate, can be really helpful. Comprehensive stool testing, like I mentioned, the GI map is what I tend to use to evaluate infections, inflammation, digestive function, and the overall microbiome. Mycotoxin testing when mold exposure is suspected, and heavy metal testing. when indicated. I often tack on that heavy metal testing as part of an HTMA or hair tissue mineral analysis test, because heavy metals are often eliminated in hair as a detox pathway there too. I also want to talk about post-viral immune activation. This is an area that's receiving much more attention. It's what happens after viral infections. So sometimes infection resolves, but the immune system never fully returns to baseline, and it ends up remaining at a heightened state of activation. This prolonged immune activation may contribute to autoimmune patterns in genetically susceptible individuals. And when clinically appropriate, additional testing for this kind of post-viral immune activation may include cytokine panels, Epstein-Barr virus antibodies, HHV6 antibodies. And the goal is not to simply identify past infections. It's to understand whether your immune system is still responding to them. If there's one thing that I hope you take away from today's episode, it's this. Autoimmunity is not simply a diagnosis. It is a reflection that the immune system has lost balance, and that balance can often be improved. The incredible thing about the immune system is that it responds to the environment you create for it every single day. Every meal, every night of sleep, every walk outside, every effort to reduce that inflammation, every step you take to improve your gut health, support your mitochondria, stabilize your blood sugar, lower toxic burden, and nourish your body is sending your immune system new information. Okay, and this is not about perfection or making sure that you're tackling all of these areas all at once, because that can create more inflammation through more stress. So one step at a time, and really creating new lifestyle habits is where you're going to get most benefit from these changes too. And these small choices repeated consistently over time can really change the environment where fertility begins. Your body is always listening. The question is, what messages are we sending it? And how can we change them to improve that fertility? Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.